Welcome to Action in Business. In these times, one thing that makes the most sense right here, right now, is to secure the future of your business. Let's take action now. Here's your action coach, Jana Hoiberg.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you 1,000 times for tuning into this edition of Action in Business with your host, Action Coach Action Jana Hoiberg, right here on News Talk 1460 KZNT Radio, where what you'll gain doesn't come from theory, it comes from real life experience. I'm your co-host, Ted Robertson, helping to introduce Jana Hoiberg and her special guest, Dan McKenzie, in part 2 of a 4-part series on the very fine art and delicate balance of negotiation and dispute resolution. Jana, recapping the last show really quick, and then BATNA is the word of the day today.
That's right. Last time, we really started introducing the negotiation styles, why it's important to be able to understand how to negotiate, as well as the 7-element checklist that you need to be able to have to be able to do those negotiations. And those 7 elements are communication, relationship, interests, options, legitimacy, alternatives, and commitments. So if you want more details on that, you get to listen to last week's episode. And this week, BATNA, Dan. So what does BATNA mean again?
Yeah, I also wanted to follow up in case people have written those down and they forget them. I've made a point, and I always make a point to let everybody know that it's really important that you use those in sequence rather than jumbling them up. However, for people to remember that, if they just remember the word broccoli,
okay,
the word broccoli has all the same letters in it that the 7-element checklist does. They're not in order, though, in the sequence, but just remember broccoli and assign the names to them. That's the best way to remember that.
Okay, so for those of you who don't like vegetables, even in negotiations, you're going to have problems.
That's right.
Jana, because it's been a week or so, shall we briefly reintroduce Dan McKenzie and Dan?
Go for it.
Talk about yourself just a little bit, just kind of a refresher. And for folks just joining us, tell us about you and how you find yourself where you are today.
Well, thanks. I first of all, I'm fascinated by the art and science behind human behavior, psychology, and why people do things and why people don't do things the right way. I've been very fortunate. I've worked globally in my career, and I've found myself on more than numerous occasions being confronted with situations that were either induced by culture or induced by different styles and demeanor of people. It could have been that places I was in were not necessarily even friendly to the United States, and I had to be very attentive and attuned to those particular things as an ambassador, as an emissary from my professional sources here. So I knew that I needed to really ramp up my skills, and I decided very early on that I was going to expose myself to the basics all the way to the extreme levels of this particular art and science. And I've gone through and done that both academically. I've been fortunate to study at one of the best schools in the country that teaches this. I've trained under some of the best mentors who teach very extreme levels of negotiation, conflict resolution, and dispute management. And I'm perfectly passionate about it, so that helps. And I've been very fortunate to be able to teach this to a lot of students in a number of different countries and watch their eyes open as they learn a little bit more, mostly about what they're not doing correctly.
And that's what we all need to learn at times, is how we can improve. And that's really, really what the show's all about, is being able to improve from there. Before we really get into BATNA a little bit more, if you have thoughts, comments, or observation, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at any time at 358-6936. That's 358-6936, or by email at janahoiberg@actioncoach.com. That's JANNAHOIBERG@actioncoach.com. And if you'd like information about coaching or upcoming events, you can visit me at the web at actioncoachcoloradosprings.com. That's actioncoachcoloradosprings.com. And I also have a fan page on Facebook, and it's Action in Business with Jana Hoiberg. You can become a fan, get free access to the show archives, and all the latest Action in Business information and updates. So, Dan, let's start and get into some of the meat of the segment and talk about why is BATNA important?
BATNA is an element that we are faced with on a daily basis, if not an hourly basis, in our professional and our personal careers. It actually is the tool and the lever that allows us to know whether we are making a good decision or we're making what we refer to as a suboptimal decision. We talked a little earlier in a previous segment about the 7 elements, which you've brought up again, and in order to get to the point where we get people to make commitments, we talked about the principled negotiator who's trying to get people to come to a mutually beneficial balance of interest and explore joint gain. That's the fairest, most durable way of crafting a good, solid, optimal outcome. In order to do that, however, you have got to get to the point where you have understood whether you're going to go left or whether you're going to go right based on what you've come through in that dialogue. And in order to do that, people refer to it as alternatives. The technical name for it is BATNA, which stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. Why is that important? Because without knowing what your best alternative to a negotiated agreement is, you are not prepared to be able to react to making a decision that for you is a satisfactory decision. You could actually hand off advantage to somebody without even knowing, simply because you haven't taken the time to understand exactly what you want and what your optimal result is.
Okay, so apply that to a real practical example.
Okay.
You know, how does that really apply to our daily lives?
I'll tell you how I was instructed, and I would highly recommend that people do this. Next time you go to buy a car, don't go to one car dealer. Take an envelope, write down what you want and what you're willing to pay, and walk around to 7 different dealers that are offering you the same car that you want to buy. Don't engage in any dialogue. Don't engage in any kind of discourse. Walk to the general sales manager and hand him the envelope and say, this is what I want, this is what I'm willing to pay for, and then walk out of the door. And that at some point, that person not having the ability to talk to you will open up that envelope. He will see what you've asked for. It's called nonverbal negotiation. And at the same time, there are 6 other people in your city who all have the exact same information, who are going to come back to you and say, yes or no, right? We're going to come to the point where they're going to have to make a decision or make a commitment to you, and they're going to have to come back and either give you what you've asked for or not. And you're not there as a pawn on that chessboard to be used to manipulate. And I'm not suggesting that when you go into an auto dealer that they're going to be any less fair with you. However, this takes their BATNA and actually worsens it. And they're actually, Jana, not to confuse your listeners, but there's actually an alternative form of that called a WATNA, which is your worst alternative to negotiated agreement. In negotiations, if you have been smart about preparing, your goal is to improve your BATNA all along. So I've just improved my BATNA because I don't want to talk to a certain person. I want them to read what I want, and I want them to respond to it. And if they don't do it, there are 6 other people who can have the opportunity to get my business.
But that is also making an assumption, and I think you've alluded to this before, that you've done some homework beforehand, and you have an idea what car you really want. Mm-hmm. So you're not walking in there going, okay, well, I want a Mercedes for $1.
Yeah.
You're looking at what the value is. You've got some information around it, and you're then coming in, to what is a good alternative, what you're really willing to do at that point in time, and seeing what happens from there.
Yeah. In our earlier segments, we've discussed the 4 components for really understanding that process, which are the landscape of your environment.
So let's talk about landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So in taking this example, what's the landscape to make sure people are really relating to what we're talking
The landscape in this sense would be that, A, there are a lot of car dealerships. There are a lot of people out there who need to sell cars.
Okay.
There are a lot of people who need the money from you to go when you want to go buy that car. And there's probably a lot of people out there willing to deal a little bit in order to get your business. That's the landscape.
Okay.
The landscape is that. The topography that's the next one. The topography is the hills and valleys, right? What do you have to cross over? What do you have to understand? No different than when you're climbing over the Front Range here. Mm-hmm. How do you get over there most efficiently, avoiding as much danger as possible in order to get to the other side? So that might be weaving your way through the car dealership, right? Knowing who you do and don't want to speak to, what you're willing to do, not being pulled off balance or pulled off course from what you want to achieve when you get in there, which that can happen in those places. A good negotiator is always trained to react to surprises, always has in his holster ammunition to protect him from that. The third, of course, is the fortification. What's the fortification? Oh, I'm sorry, we can't do that. The price is too low. We're not. I'm not in a position to do that. I'll have to go talk to my sales manager about that. Okay. At that point, I've started to exercise my BATNA because I don't care if that person goes and speaks to their sales manager. I have a piece of paper in that envelope, and they will react to it when they see it. Lastly, of course, is flag, right? Fortifications are designed to protect flags, and that's been going on for hundreds of years. The flag in this case is my car. I want that flag. So I've had to prepare all along for that. And frankly, if you've done your job well, you will walk in there well over-prepared to take that flag before that person trying to sell you that even has a chance to understand what he wants, especially when you walk out the door and leave him with something.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's great. And I think that really helps me and others to really understand and put some of the terminology together in some real practical examples from there. So let me ask you, last time you bought a car, did you do it that way?
I didn't because my cars are old, but I am going to be buying one actually pretty soon, and I'm going to do it exactly that way. What I normally do is back test everything continuously, and so yes, I will do exactly that when I do my next one.
So watch out, car dealers in North Carolina.
Well, no, I would love to give them my money. I just would like to have mutually beneficial terms.
Interesting. I spent some time selling cars in a much earlier life, at a time when the cars I was selling were not real highly rated products in the middle of Central Florida during a gas crunch. Interesting times. And you walk away from experience like that thinking you know how to buy cars because you know how to sell them. And what you've said today that's so innovative to me is the idea that you engage quickly, give the general sales manager your terms, and disengage immediately. What an interesting tactic. I'm trying to think of how that would play if that were me. Wow. Action in Business is what you're listening to on News Talk 1460 KZNT in Colorado Springs. It's the most success-filled half hour in radio. We'll be right back with Dan McKenzie and our friend Action Jana Hoiberg.